Hello again and welcome back to the channel. This is Michael from TOEFLresources.com. In today's video, I'm happy to share my 2025 guide to TOEFL speaking question 1. In today's video, I'm going to start by giving you some sample questions and answers. I'll give you some templates that you can use when you're answering the question on test day. Talk a little bit about how to come up with ideas. And at the end of the video, I'll give you some really useful advice about speaking right and AI. That is, I'm going to talk about how fast you should speak when you're answering this question, which is some advice that I think many teachers get wrong. So make sure to stick around all the way to the end for that. All right, so I will start by giving you 3 sample questions. And yeah, there's only one question in TOEFL Speaking Part 1, but it could look one of 3 different ways. First up, it could look like this. It could be, state whether you agree or disagree with the following statement. Technology has made life more complicated rather than easier. So you can see how it works. You're given a sentence, and you're asked whether you agree or disagree with it. You have to state that and to give your reasons why. Next up, it could look like this. Some universities let students get involved in decisions about how they set budgets. Others do not involve students in these decisions. Which do you think is better? So you're given like 2 kind of opposing choices, and you have to say which one is better and explain why. Lastly, it could look like this. Some companies have rules that forbid employees from using personal cell phones during working hours. Do you think this is a good idea? Why or why not? So you're given like a theoretical situation, and you're asked whether or not you think it's good. In any case, you'll have 15 seconds to prepare and 45 seconds to speak. Now, I'm going to give you a couple sample answers, and they're based on the first style. And the question again is, state whether you agree or disagree with the following statement. Technology has made life more complicated rather than easier. Now, again, I'm using this as the practice answer, but no matter what the question looks like, you're going to answer it in pretty much the same way with the same structure and the same techniques. Keep that in mind. All right, here's a sample answer to that question with 1 supporting reason. This is the method I teach most of my students. It's the best approach for most people. Here goes. While some people probably think technology makes life more complicated, I believe that it makes life a lot easier. The main reason is that we can use modern technology to easily keep in touch with our loved ones. What I mean is, things like cell phones and email are a lifesaver in the modern world because we're more likely than ever to live apart from our friends and relatives. For instance, after my 2nd year of university, I went to Paris to intern at a fashion company. I was worried that I would feel lonely all the time since I didn't know anyone there, but I used WhatsApp to call my mother every evening, which helped me adjust to my new life. Moreover, I sent my old university classmates pictures of my adventures by email, which helped us stay connected. And yeah, I mean, I know that's a pretty long answer, but it represents an ideal answer, a target answer. If you want to make it shorter, you could easily just cut off the last sentence. In terms of structure, in terms of a template, I teach my students to answer it the same way almost every time. They start out like this. While some people probably think, and then they state the opposite of their main point, I believe that, and then they state their main point. After that, they're going to say, the main reason is that, and then they're going to give their supporting reason. Then they're going to say, what I mean is, and then they're going to elaborate on that reason with more specific details and arguments. And then they say, for instance, and they give a long personal example all the way to the end of the answer. You can use this technique almost every single time, no matter what the topic is, no matter what the style is, you can pretty much do this. There are a few other minor things I'll draw your attention to, which I think gives my answer a little more complexity. First up, I always try to use conjunctions, both subordinating and coordinating conjunctions like while, but, which, when, that sort of thing. Also, I always try to use one or two transitional phrases, things like moreover, in addition, however, that sort of thing. Both of these techniques will be rewarded by both the human rater and the AI rater, so keep that in mind. Next up, here's a sample answer that uses two supporting reasons. Some people really like to have two reasons in their answer, so, I leave that as an option. It goes like this. While some people probably think technology makes life more difficult, I believe it makes life a lot easier. First of all, we can use modern technology to easily keep in touch with our loved ones. What I mean is things like cell phones and email are a lifesaver in the modern world because we're more likely than ever to live apart from our friends and relatives. Secondly, technology helps us keep up with our classes. Specifically, we can use things like ChatGPT to conduct research more quickly than before, and even to get feedback on our essays. When we use tools like this, we can finish assignments in hours instead of days. So in terms of the template and the structure, it's pretty similar to the one I showed you a moment ago, right? You're starting it in the same way. While some people probably think the opposite, I believe that. My main point. First of all, and then I state my first reason. What I mean is, and then I elaborate on it. Then I say, secondly, and I state my second reason. Then I say, specifically, and I elaborate on it. That's how I'm doing it. You'll notice there's no personal example here. I find that there just isn't enough time to have two reasons and an example. So I just teach my students to come up with two reasons and then elaborate on them with details and stuff. You don't need a personal example. It's not mandatory. Of course, there's a few things I did here, again, to give the answer more complexity. I'm using conjunctions like and when. I have moreover, which is a transitional phrase. And then you'll notice I used modern devices instead of modern technology. And yeah, I know that sounds a little crap, but I didn't want to keep saying technology, technology, technology. I'm trying to vary my vocabulary a little bit. Keep that in mind. If you want to get a really high score, try to avoid using the same words more than 2 or 3 times in the whole response. Okay, so all of that is easier said than done, right? One of the common complaints I get from students is they're like, oh, Michael, I know I have good English, but I just can't come up with any ideas. They only give me 15 seconds to prepare and my mind goes blank. So I get a really low score even though I've been speaking English all my life. Okay, I get it. Very common, right? The approach I teach my students is to think about the question in terms of these 4 categories. Think about it in terms of education. Think about it in terms of your job. Think about it in terms of your relationships and in terms of your health. I find that you can connect one or more of these topics to just about every single question in TOEFL Speaking Part 1. No matter what it's about, you can usually find a connection to these categories. And once you make that connection, your mind will get flowing and you'll be able to come up with a lot of content. So, for example, if I'm talking about technology, so I've said, okay, my main point is technology makes life easier. Okay, now what am I going to say? Well, I could connect it to my education and say something like technology makes it easier to complete our class assignments. I've said that, and then for the rest of the answer, I'm just going to talk about using technology to work on assignments. Or maybe I'm going to say, how do I connect that to my job? Well, I could say technology makes it easier to change our job. And then I'm going to just talk about that for the rest of the answer. Maybe I'll mention using LinkedIn to find a job or some app or something like that. Or maybe, like I did in my first sample answer, I'm going to connect it to my relationships and say technology makes it easier to stay in touch with our loved ones. And then I'll just talk it out for the rest of the answer. Or if I want to talk about health, technology makes it easier to detect diseases. And you only need to make one, maybe two connections, and you've got like a whole answer kind of started, right? Once you make the connection, the ideas should flow a lot more easily. All right, I'm going to kind of give you a couple tips. Now, this is not a tips or tricks video, but there is one piece of advice I've been giving my students for like 15 years, and it is this. Don't overthink it. This is just a language test. What do I mean? Well, you don't need two reasons. One reason, totally fine. You're not judged based on the number of reasons you give. Second, you don't need to be interesting. It's okay to be boring. You're not judged based on how interesting you are. You're not judged based on how unique your answer is. You can give the same boring old answer that a million other students have given. That's totally fine. You don't need to be convincing. You don't need to have a good argument. Your argument can be stupid. You're not judged based on your logic or your persuasiveness. This is not a philosophy test. This is an English test. What you do need is to speak clearly and correctly. Focus on that. That means good grammar, good vocabulary, good language use, good pronunciation. Those are the things that you're judged based on, okay? Keep that in mind, and it might make the test a little bit less overwhelming, a little bit less stressful. All right, so I'm going to conclude the video by talking a little bit about AI. As most of you know, your answer is going to be rated by one human and by some AI developed by ETS called SpeechRater. Check out this fun chart. I got this from a website called myspeakingscore.com, and they license the actual AI that ETS uses on the real test. And you can use it to prepare for the TOEFL, which is pretty cool. Now, I would need a whole video to talk about all of this, but very quickly, here are the main categories the AI uses. First up is speaking rate. That's how fast you speak. Next up is sustained speech. That's whether or not you have these long pauses in your answer where you have to stop and think about yourself. You're going to lose points if you stop and think for too long. Some of them are self-explanatory, like pause frequency, distribution of pauses, repetitions, rhythm and vowels. That's strongly connected to your pronunciation. Vocabulary depth, that's how kind of advanced your vocabulary is. Vocabulary diversity, that's simply the range of words you use, like how many different words are in your answer. Grammatical accuracy, grammatical complexity, and discourse coherence. Discourse coherence is connected to your use of transition words, like I talked about a moment ago. So the question, of course, is, wow, that's a lot of things. What's most important? Well, for me, speaking rate. I've experimented with this tool thousands of times, and it always seems like speaking rate is the most important dimension. If speaking rate is high, everything else tends to be high. If speaking rate is low, everything else tends to be low. All right, so what does that mean? Like, how fast should you speak? Well, like my kind of golden target is 120 words for the whole answer. That's a lot, right? And again, that's an ideal. 115 is pretty good. 110 is pretty good. 105 is okay. But like, you know, the perfect target I recommend is 120 words. That means you need to be speaking fairly quickly. A lot of teachers will say, just go slow, take your time, speak at a conversational pace like you're talking to your friends. I think that's bad advice. Like, I don't want you to be speaking like a fire hose, just bursting forth with 1,000,000 words a minute. But I don't want you to be speaking just like, you know, in a casual way either. Go back and listen to the sample answer I gave a moment ago. I'm speaking pretty quickly, right? That's a lot faster than when I talk to my wife or my friends. And I think that's key for a high score. This will take some experimentation. Like basically, try to speak a little bit faster every time you do a practice answer and then count the words. Once you get up to like 115, 120, you're in pretty good shape. And that will kind of maximize your TOEFL speaking score. Keep that in mind. All right, I'm going to leave it at that. But as always, I invite you to check out my website, which is TOEFLresources.com. I have guides to every section of the test, and I have a big collection of sample questions and answers you can use when you're studying. I think there's like 25 of them now at this point, so that's pretty cool. While you're there, you can also sign up for my speaking evaluation service, where you record yourself, you email me the recording, and then I respond with a score, with some comments, and with an AI report like I showed you a few seconds ago. Meanwhile, if you have any questions, please leave them down below. I love answering questions. I come by the channel every few days and I clear out all the old questions, and it gives me a lot of joy, so please don't be shy. Meanwhile, make sure to subscribe to the channel, because I think I will publish my updated guide to TOEFL Speaking Question 2 probably next month.